The third day of January, the year 2026, will go down in history because of the dramatic manner in which Nicolas Maduro was plucked out of his residence in Caracas in Venezuela. But this is not without precedent. And in any event, the Americans had already indicated through President Trump that they were thinking of this very act when the president said that they were conducting covert activities inside of Venezuela. And when they positioned one of their most sophisticated seagoing vessels in the Caribbean, it was quite clear that it was just a matter of time. And what this tells us is that we have a rehash of the Monroe Doctrine. Many who are students of history will remember on the second day of December, it was in 1823, the then President of the United States, James Monroe, while addressing Congress, stated or made a statement that then became known as the Monroe Doctrine. At that time, the target were the European powers who were engaged in colonization. Today, we can actually talk about the Trump Doctrine. And the Trump Doctrine, when I think about it, reminds me of an event on the 30th day of September, 1862, Otto von Bismarck, when he told the Prussian parliament that the issues of the day will not be resolved by resolutions and speeches, but by blood and iron. The Trump Doctrine is that the issues of the day will not be resolved by speeches and resolutions, but by missiles and drones and warships. And this is gunboat diplomacy at its very best. Trump is saying, in order to make America great again, America must be the hegemon of the world. America must be the policeman or policewoman of the world. And what is right is what America says is right. And we have seen this not only in the Venezuelan case, we have seen the rhetoric relating to Nigeria, the rhetoric relating to Iran. So when one looks at these events and contextualizes them, the sad story is we are witnessing the death of international law as it was conceived in San Francisco in 1945. Begging the question, is the UN relevant, or it should be re-examined in the same way that the League of Nations was? As for Venezuela, I think the President of the United States has been very clear. Ours is diplomacy, and is an insult to the word diplomacy to talk about diplomacy in this context, is that we will get your resources. Hear him say, we have companies that are going to exploit the resources of Venezuela, and we are going to ensure that the resources and the funds realized will be helped to grow Venezuela. We are going to run Venezuela. If one doubted that colonization, classical colonization is back, it is. And Trump is saying it without mincing any words, without batting an eyelid. And Venezuela, in my view, is a test case. If I was in Colombia, I would be very worried, because he is saying you are facilitating what he calls narco-terrorism. And he is the judge, jury, and executioner. It is a sad day for international law. It is a sad day for the question of sovereignty and equality of nations. That a country's head of state can be plucked out, handcuffed, and taken to a foreign country to face charges. However legitimate it is sad. But as I've already indicated, it is with precedent. Noriega in Panama, Saddam Hussein, Muammar al-Gaddafi, And even as early as 1903 with Panama, one may even say with Haiti, Jean-Bertrand Aristide, dangerous times, sad times, the law of the jungle, survival of the fittest, and the dying of the least suitable. In my view, international relations is very nuanced. Because what would they do? Would they invade the United States of America? Because that is the best thing, that something should happen, that missiles should now be directed to the United States of America. But things don't work that way. The only thing that has now happened is that all the arguments that the Americans had against everybody else, against Russia and Ukraine, are now illegitimate. The argument that they have against China invading Taiwan are now illegitimate. And it also gives very bad ideas to some of former colonizers and neo-colonizers that you can actually go into a country and because you are a nuclear power, nothing will happen. That is the danger. The best that the friends of Venezuela can and are already doing is to condemn the United States of America to hold sessions at the UN. But if you listen to Trump's speech at the UN during the last General Assembly, he has contempt for the UN. He was insulting UN. He was insulting the countries. And he is saying it is the United States of America that counts. The rest of the world does not count. Of course, his language is hyperbolic. We are the best. We are the leading. Our military is the best. We can do things that no other country can do. But he also knows that what he is doing is going to face condemnation. Within the United States of America itself, you have seen Senator Bernie Sanders come out and say that the President of the United States must not declare war without the sanction of the Congress. And it is a sad thing because what is also happening in the United States is that we see a President of the United States that is rendering all organs of the state useless. Congress not involved, informed after the fact. In fact, if Trump were in another country, he would be a classical dictator. But that is not the language that we are using to describe him. At least the Western media is not using that kind of language. But it tells you that the year 2026 and beyond is going to be a year that is defined by unilateralism. But remember that when they talk about having control of Latin America, they are very careful in not talking about Brazil or Mexico. The countries that are being scared are the small ones, and it appears that resources is what is defining American policy under Trump. And we have seen it, the transactional manner in which he signed an agreement with Ukraine, the transactional manner in which he signed an agreement with the Democratic Republic of Congo. So Venezuela is a warning to the world. Venezuela is a guinea pig. Venezuela is a trial ground. And one waits to see what the other powers are going to do about it. Russia, China, one would also say India can do something about it. Brazil, President Lula has already spoken quite firmly. But beyond speaking firmly, beyond convening urgent meetings of regional bodies and UN bodies, what else can be done? Because the United States is the United States, military power. But what I can read is that the Third World War is already being fought in piecemeal. One only prays and hopes that no mistake is made and that no nuclear power triggers a nuclear device. You know, history is very consistent. This assumption that you can walk into a country and control our affairs is misguided. Attempts were made in Afghanistan, failed. Vietnam failed. Iraq failed. It can never happen. You can get into a country, you can bomb a country, you can use missiles, you can do all these things, but if you don't capture the spirit and nationalism of a people, you are not about to control them. Colonialism in its classical sense, as was practiced by the European powers, I think is dead. What we are going to see is perhaps they'll have a puppet regime. They'll have a regime that is scared of the United States of America and therefore checks every other activity with the United States. What he's going to achieve is going to ensure that American companies are going to exploit the oil in Venezuela, and that they are going to ensure that if elections are held, the individuals who contest the elections are approved by the United States of America. And that is possible because fear will be instilled in them. The army of Venezuela now knows that they do not stand a fighting chance against the United States, and they knew it already. So it's going to be administration by intimidation, so that Venezuela is, for the foreseeable future, being prepared to be a satellite state of the United States of America. I wouldn't be surprised if in a few weeks' time, the President of the United States calls it the 52nd state of the United States of America, having called Canada the 51st. So that is the kind of rhetoric that one is going to see. But yet I believe that a post-Trump environment is going to be an environment of repair. Whichever administration comes after Trump is going to try and restore some kind of normalcy, some kind of predictability to American foreign policy. As it is now, American foreign policy is so eclectic, so one would say so unpredictable, and that is sad because America is not respected. America is feared, and respect that is born out of fear is not the kind of respect that one wants. And I believe that if you took the pulse of the American streets or the American politician who is realistic and sensible and know that you live in a world that requires order, they must be very sad about what is happening to their country and what their country is doing to their neighbors. Somebody has done a parody in which is saying exactly that. He's saying, if you are dissatisfied with your neighbor because they are playing loud music, just get there and take it over. Sad. When one looks at the charges that have been leveled against President Maduro, narco-terrorism, those are the grand words that are being used. And once again, these are things that we have seen before. The former president of Honduras was accused of the very same thing, and not so long ago was actually pardoned by President Trump. Manuel Antonio Noriega, the same kind of thing. And now Maduro is the head of some drug cartel. I believe that that is not true. When one is a head of state, one does not need to get into those spaces. It may be the case that drug traffickers and dealers are active in Venezuela in the same way that they are active in the United States of America, in the same way that they are active in Colombia, the Escobars of this world as they were, in the same way that they are active in Mexico. But there is an old English saying that if you want to hang a dog, you give it a bad name. So they want to hang Maduro, you give him the worst of the names, a narco-terrorist. And in that way, he's dead on arrival. the trial is one that is designed to justify a sentence that has already, in my view, been determined. So there is going to be all manner of evidence, concocted evidence, that is going to be brought about by the drug enforcement agencies. And if you can't get it, you are going to create it. And in any event, it is their case, and they are determined to ensure that there is a conviction of some kind. But to say that he is the head of a drug cartel, and people within the United States of America have questioned this. I said, even before they took Maduro and they were bombing the boats outside of the sea, they were saying, but arrest them, charge them, give us the evidence, so that we are able to determine for ourselves that there is legitimacy in the accusations that are being made. But nobody is interested in that. It is the accusations, it is the big words that are being used, narco-terrorism. It is as if the United States of America is incapable of stopping this. I mean, if you look at Venezuela, the size of Venezuela and the state of Texas, if the United States of America wanted to police our borders effectively to stop any movement of drugs, they would. But it must also be remembered that what we call drugs have legitimate medicinal value, so that countries actually grow coca, which is then used for making medicine. So the line is thin, but the accusations are loud. In my view, it is regime change. When Hugo Chavez took power and said that Venezuela is a Bolivarian republic in remembrance of Simon Bolivar, the Americans said, we cannot have this kind of socialist state in our neighborhood. And one will remember that the Bush administration, both Bushes, were against Hugo Chavez. And Maduro is seen as a protege of Hugo Chavez. So it is teaching people with socialist tendencies a lesson. Telling Venezuela will not have Maduro. Sending a message to Cuba, we also are looking at you. Sending a message to Venezuela, rather to Colombia, we are looking at you. Sending a message to Nicaragua, we are looking at you. Sending a message to Peru, we are looking at you. To Guatemala, we are looking at you, because this is our backyard. And in our backyard, you do what we want, not what you want. That is the message. You know, the question of this narco-terrorism and the place of Maduro in the entire equation has many nuances. We all know that Maduro is a protege of Hugo Chavez. And even if we were to assume that the accusations leveled against him by the United States of America have some merit, the question is, isn't there a better way of doing it? But I understand the American logic only to that extent, that if you want to destroy a snake, you strike its head. And that therefore, once you've struck Maduro, you are instilling fear into the others, and they'll follow the path that you desire. And I've heard the President of the United States saying that if the Vice President of Venezuela, now already installed as the interim president, behaves well, behaves as we want, then we will deal with them. In other words, you are being told behaving well means to do what America wants. What does America want? The president has already said, we want your oil. You have the largest oil reserve in the world. You have the best quality oil that we need. Our companies were the ones that were involved in exploiting all these many years ago. It is payback time. So you sit there, you are the head of our firm, as it were. you are a manager of our resources, we'll exploit them, and when we get the money, we'll bring it back, some of it back to you so that you can run your country. But remember that you are ours. That is the message that is being sent to Venezuela. Number two, they are being told, we do not like the way you've run your politics. Your politics must be run in the manner that America considers to be right. And that is why he says, we will run Venezuela after we are satisfied that they have come of age. And we think that they can run their affairs to mean that they can do what we want. Then we'll allow them to have an election, which I suspect they will supervise, and they'll produce a candidate who behaves the way the United States of America wants. That is an analogy number one. The second one is, of course, as the saying goes, when you want to scatter the sheep, you kill the shepherd. The shepherd was the shepherd was Nicolas Maduro. Maduro is now out, and by Maduro being humiliated, and you can see it is very deliberate, the images that are being produced to the world or shown to the world is to humiliate Maduro. This is your former president who was speaking with conviction. Now see how he is in handcuffs, held, blindfolded, being mushed, humbled in the dock in the United States of America. And he's telling those in Venezuela and Caracas, if you don't play ball, you will be like Maduro. And that is exactly the message that they are sending to the Venezuelans. They want to change the politics of Venezuela so that Venezuela becomes what one can say Panama became after Noriega. What Puerto Rico is, that is what they want. And if you misbehave, remember, you are only a ballistic missile away. Remember, you are only a tomahawk flight away. Remember, you are only a drone away. Remember, we have our Delta Force. They'll come in the dead of night, switch off your electricity, and pluck you out of your bedroom. He or she who plucks you out of your bedroom, you have no defense against them. And they are telling them, you have no army. What you have are possibly a group of Boy Scouts and Girl Guides masquerading as an army. They have no chance. The only chance that they have against the United States is the chance that a snowball has in hell. History also teaches us that this idea that you can stop drug trafficking is like saying you'll end sin in the world. Drugs are with us because there is the demand and supply side of it. And the demand side of it is in the United States of America. Unless those who are consuming drugs in the United States of America said that we have now taken a solemn vow that we are no longer going to consume drugs, and I've not heard them say that, then drugs will always be there. What happens in situations such as this is that they'll go underground wherever they come from, and we know they just don't come from Venezuela. They come from different parts of the world. So this idea that you can bomb drugs out of people's desire is misguided, and everybody knows that it's misguided. But of course, you can use drugs as an excuse for doing the thing that you wanted. And I think President Trump has been very bold in saying what they wanted. Oil. Do they have the oil? Debatable. Because be careful, there is a saying, is a Ghanaian tree saying, that be careful. Don't run after a coward, because when you run after a coward for too long, you may meet the coward's courage. Perhaps one day they'll meet the courage of the coward that is Venezuela. When the events of the 3rd of January 2026 will be revisited, many questions will be asked. Why was it, from the perspective of observers, so laser pointed, so successful, that there are no casualties on the part of the United States of America? We now know that there are casualties on the part of the Venezuelans. And I think conspiracy theorists will have no shortage of theories. And allow me to be one such theorist for this particular case. I personally hold the view that Maduro was betrayed from inside. That very useful details were offered to the Americans. And remember that President Trump had said a while before that he was instructing the CIA to conduct covert activities within Venezuela to soften the ground. I think that is during that period that critical human assets within Venezuela and within their forces might have been recruited. So that while Maduro thought that these were people looking after his welfare and that of his family, these were actually individuals who were working for the United States of America. That is why it was pinpointed, it was done with precision, and they ensured that there were no casualties. I think that this was betrayal. I'm waiting for Hollywood to do a movie on it, and I think that there will be Operation Caracas, or the invasion of Caracas. In the next 1 year, we are going to see the movie and all the conspiracy theories, but there is no doubt there was betrayal. And I think we have had a conversation in which we actually did say that Venezuela is a very divided society, so that even within the forces, there are elements who are anti-Maduro. And when they saw the opportunity of having Maduro being eliminated or being plucked out of Caracas and being taken out of Venezuela, they must have said, Eureka, we have won. And for them, this was a Eureka moment, betrayal. Remember, the similitude of this was that of Noriega, but Noriega fought and only surrendered after he knew that he was going to expose the entire population to pain. But here, no struggle, not even a bullet fired. Surely. Conspiracy. Immediately after the events of the 3rd day of January 2026, President Trump was quick to say that we are going to run Venezuela. And we are going to run Venezuela until such a time that we think that is ready to receive a transfer of power. But it is easier said than done. And experience tells us that it's not so easy that you just remove one person and then you bring in somebody else as the president. That person would be exposed to danger. Maduro has been in power. He was in power with Hugo Chavez. He himself has been head of state for nearly 19 years, if not 19 years. So he has a system. There will be opposition, as indeed there is. But they are Maduro loyalists. They are Venezuelans who are nationalistic, who say that even if Maduro committed the offenses for which he's being accused, his arrest in the manner that he was is a humiliation of the people of Venezuela. And that therefore, if you bring the Lady Machado and said, oh, the Western world has given you this crown that they normally give people, and the Nobel Prize has now become such a political prize. When the West wants to hoist you and to lift you a stature, then even if you are a warmonger, they give you the Nobel Peace Prize. And it is easier said than done, because you can't just bring them and then say you are now the president of Venezuela. And Trump, of course, is capable of saying one thing today and another tomorrow. So you never know that as a part of the transition, because one of the things that may be on the cards is that the new administration, in order to be acceptable to the United States of America, must infuse within their ranks elements from the opposition. So that is a possibility that other people like Guaido, who was himself in opposition for a long time, and the lady, the Nobel Prize winner, will be infused into the process so that they begin to understand how government works. But as I have said, we are now swimming in the sea of speculation, and in that sea, it is very easy to drown and to overthink. But the reality is that these are very difficult times. It is not easy. And sometimes a country does not want to get too deep into the affairs of a nation. America thought they could do to Vietnam what they did not do. So you don't want to sink too deep and have your nose blooded. They have experience of their nose being blooded in Vietnam, in Somalia, in Iraq, in Afghanistan, and I'm sure there are elements within the United States of America, senators, congressmen, and others who will be able to say, please, we have done what we have done, let us retreat. So the year 2026, the first half of it, as regards Venezuela, is going to offer very interesting scenarios. So I'm quite certain that strategists and commentators in the world are going to have a field day in scenario creation, and it's going to be interesting. You know, Vice President Rodriguez, who is now the interim president, and I've been listening to their rhetoric quite keenly. They say she's the interim president, and the president of Venezuela is still Nicolás Maduro. Why are they saying that? They are appeasing the elements within government and within army who are loyal to Maduro. That Maduro is still the head. What we have is simply an interim administration as we deal with the Maduro case. And that what we are saying, and you'll hear us saying, and even negotiating with the United States of America, that President Maduro be released. And that even if he is released, he does not come back to be the president of Venezuela, he will come back home. You are going to hear a lot of that from Rodriguez, and that is why she's being described as being pragmatic, that she is not an ideologue in the class of Nicolás Maduro, that she is capable of navigating the corridors of international diplomacy in such a manner that will enable her to pacify the Maduro group and also to pacify the Americans and walk the middle path. And that middle path is going to be the path to follow in order to preserve Venezuela. And I'm waiting for the kind of rhetoric that Venezuela is bigger than all of us, and that we cannot allow an assault on one person and his wife to destroy Venezuela. For that reason, let us respect and accommodate our big brother neighbor, the United States of America. In any event, it is in our best interest, in any event, and I foresee in the next 2 weeks, all the sanctions against Venezuela are going to be lifted. And when you lift the sanctions against Venezuela and you begin to allow Venezuela to sell oil, then you begin to have goods in the supermarkets and things are accessible. Then the man and woman on the ground will say, but life is becoming better post-Maduro. And once you do that, the man and woman in the street will say, but it appears that without Maduro, life is better. It appears that during the administration of Rodriguez, things are improving. And once things are improving, Rodriguez can then announce that we'll have an interim administration for 3 years. Then we go into elections. And when we go into elections, I am a candidate. And the United States will say, we don't mind Rodriguez, and life will continue. Speculation. The fact that Maduro and his wife have been taken must be understood in the context of the power dynamics in Venezuela. Celia Flores, I believe is her name, was at one time the head of the parliament, a speaker. So in her own right, she's a politician. and a very powerful politician. So they are being seen as a power couple, so that if you eliminate one, you are not solving the total equation. So you take them as a team. So it's not your typical first lady whose only role is to smile well, carry a handbag, and dress well. She is an iron lady in many ways with informal power in Venezuela. And some say that if you crossed her path, then you were politically dead. So I think it is a message that we will not allow somebody who is powerful to remain and is associated with Maduro, and the wife was in that class. Is in the same category, for example, of Imelda Marcos. These are power couple. And that is the context in which her being taken away is understood. And of course, she's also facing charges in her own right, which means the Americans are saying, at least the Trump administration is saying, they were working as a team. And it is as a team that we must deal with them. I think what is going to happen, the script is already there. What is going to happen is that they are going to be tried, and in a kangaroo process effectively. That trial is going to lead to convictions of long-term conviction, 20-something years, the Noriega script, the Honduran president script. So they are going to be jailed for a long time. They are going to attack their assets and assets of people associated with them. That, I think, is what is going to happen. And after some time, possibly after Trump, when there is a new administration, then they will be pardoned. I think the script is always there. They tried, convicted, then you are pardoned by another administration. That is the script.
This is the journey to one Africa.